Hello, JOL class. I hope that your time with us has been fruitful and that your English comprehension skills have improved over time. This morning I'm just going to briefly talk about the resurrection and one thing we might be able to learn from it. It says, He is risen. He is not here. Easter is coming up. And for Christians, Easter is a very important day. It's a day that we celebrate Jesus Christ coming back from the dead. And one of the things we understand when we talk about resurrection, we mean it is a physical resurrection. That Jesus, when he came back, he was flesh and bones. And so one of the things, and there's many things we can learn from the resurrection, but one thing that I want to talk about briefly this morning is this. One thing that the resurrection teaches us is that the physical body is important. And the reason it's important is because Jesus Christ is right now in a physical body. So how does that affect us? How does that help us? Well, I think in one aspect is if you have children, you may sometimes ask this question. If your child goes through any anxiety or any depression, remember, all children and everyone goes through anxiety, depression, and stress. But at a certain point, it goes from being something that is normal to something that is unhealthy. And it can go all the way to being extremely unhealthy to where you need to get professional help. But this morning, I want to focus on just the one thing, and that is the aspect of the physical. So we might ask the questions, how does the resurrection help us in dealing with the anxiety and stress and depression of our children? Well, one, I think it says this. We need to care for their physical needs. What the Bible teaches us is that people are complex. We have physical, we have mental, we have emotions, and we're also spirit and spiritual. And when you look at the complexity of who we are, all of it meshes and works together. And one thing that the Bible teaches us and the resurrection teaches us is this. The physical aspect is important. Because if there's something wrong with your physical well-being, it will affect your mind, it will affect your emotions, it will affect your soul. So briefly, I'm going to just suggest a few things that we might be able to do as parents when our children are struggling with depression, anxiety, or stress that would be helpful for them. And that is this. Meet their physical needs. I start off with one. Help them get sleep. Often when a child or a person is stressed or anxious, what happens is they're not able to sleep. Sleep is very difficult for them. And so they can go days without getting any real sleep. And one thing we can do as parents is to help set up situations that will be helpful for them to get sleep. One in our day and culture that I could suggest amongst other, but one is take away their phone. Take away their devices. Because if you got them, they're up sometimes all night looking at that. And sometimes when they're looking at that, they're looking at things and their mind's going all over the place. And then sometimes if they're doing social media, they might be seeing things that are making them more depressed. You have this wild cycle. And so one of the things that we can do is to help them sleep, because if they don't get enough sleep, what happens? You don't think as well. You're not as sharp. Your body's off rhythm, which it makes it much more easy for you to get more depressed, more anxious, and more stressed. So something as meeting the simple need of helping them get to sleep can begin to help them. Help them eat. If you ever dealt with anyone or know anyone that's been anxious or depressed or stressed, or very and extremely, they can't eat. They have trouble eating. Well, one of the things that we can do is to help them eat so they can begin to get nutrients in the body, to get back into the rhythm of life. You see, all this works together. And what happens sometimes is, I'm not talking about candy and things like that. I'm talking about food, but it may be letting them eat what they will eat. Sometimes as parents, you say, you gotta eat this, you gotta eat this, but if they're not eating it, you gotta start where they're willing to eat. Because getting some nutrients into their body is better than getting none. And so what happens is what? If you don't eat, once again, you're off rhythm, easier to get stressed, more anxious, you don't think as clearly. See, if you notice something with depression, anxiety, stress, one of the things that happens is they don't sleep, they don't eat. Their body gets all off rhythm. And one thing the parents could do is meet their physical needs so that they can fall back into a rhythm with the nutrients, the rest that they need, so when that happens, they can think clear. Doesn't mean they're not going to have any anxiety or stress. Doesn't mean they're not going to have some fight with depression. But what it means is that when you're more stable, you can make better choices, or it doesn't bother you as much. Another one is to help them get outdoors, do activities. What happens again, right? When someone is depressed, anxious, or stressed, they don't want to do anything. They just want to sit there. Sometimes they just want to be on the device all day long. Well, it helps to get them out. And sometimes it helps them get out in the daylight, the sunlight, the air, the fresh air. It doesn't matter if it's a walk or if it's something simple, it's just going to the store, doing some activity. You know what I'm saying? You're getting them out, breaking that rhythm, getting them to see more. The reality is, all of a sudden, when we begin to address their physical needs, guess what? It can help their mental state, it can help their spiritual state, it can help their emotional state. It's because we're all tied together. And sometimes when people go into these states, we start looking at all these different avenues and trying to help out all the things. But if you look at the resurrection, this is one of the things we have to look at. Not just, the only one. There's many, but this morning I'm only, because of time, just looking at one and looking at this very briefly. It says this: you need to care for the physical needs. Because the physical is important. That's why Jesus is resurrected, and that's why Christians value the physical body so much. That's why in the history, Christians have started hospitals. Why? We care for the physical well-being of people, because we know that it's tied into their mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being as well. That's why on Easter Sundays, you often hear Christians do this when we meet each other in the hallway or we're in the worship. One person would say, "He is risen." And then the response is, "He is risen indeed." And the reason Christians do that is to remind ourselves that Jesus Christ is alive. And he's alive, physically alive. And so the Bible tells us a number of things. And one thing that we covered this morning is this: the resurrection of Jesus Christ shows us that the physical body is important to God. And that gives us hope. I hope you enjoy your class and that you continue to grow in your English conversational skills. Please take care. And hopefully, one day we'll be able to see each other again in person. But until then, stay safe.